So close, almost there. And we're live. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the BAMP Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty. And today we are doing part 2 of our, I guess we could call it our episodes looking at the unionization effort at Paizo. And with us today from United Paizo Workers is Katina Davis. How you doing, Katina?
Good. How are you?
We're great, and thank you so much for coming out to join us this evening. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we also have, at this point, frequent co-host, Owen KC Stephens. How you doing, Owen?
Hi, folks. I'm good. I'm doing well.
So, just to recap, a couple weeks ago we had Owen and Jason Tondro on, and this was just when a couple days after the union had been announced and the ramp up was starting, and it was, kind of an exciting podcast. There was kind of a groundswell of support from the comment section, and since then, victory, I guess we can say, has been achieved. Paizo voluntarily recognized the union, and so I won't say it feels anticlimactic. I was just expecting more of a long, protracted fight. So, congratulations. And what are the next steps for you folks?
Well, so I know that we recently had a meeting with our local chapter, which is, I believe, 7,800. It's a Seattle chapter of the CWA, because previously we'd been working with someone who was more of a regional, most of the Northwest, I believe. But now we're working with a group in Seattle. So that was kind of a first step, is find a closer, more local chapter. And then the next step from here is just we're going to have to figure out a few people for the bargaining committee. And then they're going to meet with Paizo executives, the leadership team, and work on the contract. So that's kind of where we're heading next, is figuring out who's going to be in that bargaining committee.
It sounds like preliminary steps, trying to figure out what to ask for and how to ask for them. And so probably don't want to go into too many details at this point. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Well, again, congratulations. That is great. Owen, do you have any comments or thoughts or questions for Katina?
Yeah, if people want to know what the union is asking for or talking about, the union has their own website where they put up notices. They've got a Twitter feed. So they have talked about wanting to make sure that policies are in place that protect minorities and trans employees and LGBTQ, and have that be codified. They've talked about their concerns about work from home. When will that end? Is it something that won't end and can be extended? What are hiring practices going to be? So I'm sure the nitty-gritty details of, and of course, salary. I'm sure the nitty-gritty details of exactly what they want, what their priorities are, when the negotiating starts, those are things that will be announced when they're fixed. But when we had the first conversation with Tondro, one of the things I said was, these things take time. And it took Paizo ownership and management just about exactly a week to voluntarily recognize the union. And I know that within that week, there are already people who are saying, hey, it's already Monday. Hey, it's already Tuesday. Sure. But a week for a company to voluntarily acknowledge a union is actually lickety-split lightning fast.
Oh, yeah.
They could have dragged this out for a long time. They could have spent money trying to prevent it. They had all sorts of options, and they didn't take any of those. I mentioned at the time that it just takes a company time to go over their due diligence, right? They're worried about their investment and their employees and their legal responsibilities. Well, now that extends to the negotiation between the union and Paizo. Both sides very much would like to have a deal in place, right? We know that because the union has bothered to form, and we know that from Paizo because they recognized it. And recognizing the union means that a deal will have to be found. But these are smart, experienced people who have done their homework, and it's going to take time to work out what that process will be, right? And I'm sure that there are steps that everyone is already roughly familiar with, and this is one of the places where the United Paizo Workers made the really smart step of getting a parent union, so that they've got people they can go to with experience that have actually taken this forward and can tell them, what are practical considerations, what are legal considerations. Same reason that the union did not announce itself until they had a supermajority of people that had signed on. So there are going to be multiple steps to this process. The Paizo United Workers are going to have to decide who is going to represent us in these, and how are we going to determine who those people are, and then what are our primary concerns, and then they will bring that to negotiating table. at the same time, management has to decide who's going to be there on the manager's end of things. And then in both cases, even if they come up with an agreement, right, they're going to have to go back to their stakeholders and say, hey, this is what we've got. Is this something we agree to? So
Right.
It's like if we want to put everything in ridiculous RPG terms, and since, don't split the party was such a brilliant tagline for this union to form, I feel like doing that as schlocky as it is. So the adventure has been decided upon. The adventuring party has been selected, but now they have to figure out who's going to play the rogue and how much rope are we going to have and what spells do I want to prepare and how are we dividing treasure. It's like a giant session zero, even though we have now agreed on who the principals are and what the event is. There's a lot of pre-planning that both sides are going to have to undertake before they can get on to the business of actually getting something in place. And this is one of the reasons why unionizing is difficult. It is a lot of work. I mean, it's been a lot of work for them even to get to this point. And it's work that I did not have to do any of because I left Paizo rather than try to unionize it. Katina worked there the same time I do. She's still there. I'm not. So this is on her now and the people that are there new and such to get these things done. But the hope, of course, is that once that extra work gets done, and it is extra work, right? The employees are still doing their normal jobs. The executives and the owners are still doing everything they do. And then on top of that, they've got to do this complicated process of first getting ready to negotiate, then negotiating, and then when the negotiations are over, having those approved. But once all of those steps are in place, the idea is that you will have a better environment for all concerned so that everyone can move forward more comfortably and more successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing is, I mean, that's part of, some of the frustrations that people have bumped up against is kind of not codified processes or kind of lack of communication and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, this should hopefully set in motion some of those processes that'll help things flow more smoothly and, we'll actually have set ways to do stuff and set, boxes we need to tick and everything like that to make sure that hopefully everybody's voice is heard and everybody's getting, kind of their say, and we can make sure to help as many people as within the company as we can.
And I mean, even when I worked there, it was not at all unusual for someone to say, "Hey, I heard customer service has a 500 message backlog each that they have to get through," and I'm in a different department. And I'm like, "Is there anything we can do to help? Can I, if I get on and tell people, hey, look, I know that there are some questions about this new product. We'll be happy to answer them. It'll take time." But there was no really good way for the concerns of employees in one department to be addressed by employees in another. And managers were, of course, busy managing their own departments. So they didn't really have time to try and figure out what they could do for other departments. Codifying processes is important, and it needn't be anything malicious necessarily when a process is not codified. When I was hired at Paizo, there was a process in place where you would get told, okay, you're going to Gen Con. We're going to work you at Gen Con. We're going to fly you out. We're going to give you a per diem. We're going to put you up in a hotel room, and we will assign you 8 to 10 hours of work over the weekend. And then you will earn comp days so you can take time off on future days. And that was the process. Well, I got hired and I did that the first year. And then I decided, I am a little older and a little heavier, and I don't like doing all the running around to try and get 8 hours of work in while dealing with the heat, while running up and down stairs and trying to get. And Paizo would work with me; they'd found stuff I could do, but there were more people at Paizo than they needed at that point. So I went to them and said, "Hey, I would like to volunteer to not go." Well, no one had apparently ever volunteered to not go, or at least regularly enough for there to be a process. Right? People had said, "I'm interested" or "I'm not interested," but it's just up till that point. Everyone they could spare kind of had to go. It was a smaller company. And someone may have said, "Oh, this is how we'll handle that." But there was not time to get that written down, get it into an employee handbook, get it out. Then I started saying, "Hey, I'd like to go, but on my own dime. But can I get a room from your hotel block and just pay for it myself?" Well, again, if no one's ever done that before, it's perfectly reasonable for people to say, yes, we can do that, but then you need a written process in place. And that process changed several times while I was there.
Yeah.
And it's always hitting during Gen Con, which is one of the busiest times at Paizo. So things just slip between the cracks. And the problem with things slipping between the cracks is that means that if one manager thinks one thing is reasonable, and another manager thinks a different thing is reasonable, and a third manager is dealing with problems that are related but not exactly the same, and the way they are dealing with it is getting fed back through a game of telephone to people in another department, you do not necessarily have equitable treatment of all of the employees, not out of malice, but out of being overworked, not having time to write things down, and not having had a policy in place where everyone can come together and say, hey, I see that policy, that seems reasonable, but what about this thing? What about that thing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's never been, as far as I can tell, it's never been much of a policy so much as it's just a judgment call by, whoever in management is in charge of assigning people. So it's kind of, that's one of the things obviously that came up kind of during the kerfuffle is, how do we select people that go to conventions, and do we give everyone a fair shot, and what are the, I don't want to say requirements, but what are the different things that we take into consideration when we decide who we're sending and who we're not, and who we need, because we do need people back home, working like kind of troubleshooting if there's tech problems or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's different too depending on who you talk to, because some people, they're like, oh, at Gen Con, it's such a rush every year, and it's just so busy, and I get so exhausted. And then there's kind of the greener people who are like, man, I would really love to go to Gen Con. That'd be so much fun. And like, there's, I mean, obviously not everyone can get what they want, but I do look forward to having a more regulated way that we know kind of who's going and who's not, so that it's less of just kind of a waiting game of like a lottery.
And there are different concerns between the employees and the company for going to Gen Con, right? Paizo wants to make sure that they send people so that everything they think needs to get done gets done, so that the booth is set up, the booth is torn down, products are sold, things are stocked, seminars are given. That's their primary concern. But for employees, being able to go to Gen Con can be an opportunity to see friends that live in other states or even other countries. It can be an opportunity to make contacts and talk to people that you would not otherwise have an opportunity to talk to in person. It can be an opportunity to grow as an employee, right? When I'm a designer and I go to Gen Con and I'm sitting in a room with 4 other designers for 4 other companies, and we're all talking about things that we have done to overcome design problems, I'm becoming a better designer, which means that holding me back, if I was not able to go, then I might not be able to develop at the same speed as other employees who are then given yet other opportunities based purely on, oh, they keep coming up with clever solutions, oh, they have this experience doing these other projects. Those are all cases of, you can look at each individual moment and say, this is reasonable, this is reasonable, this is reasonable. But then someone says, hey, I haven't gotten to go for 8 years, or I've gone, but I am always scheduled during all the hours that any of the seminars are going, so I can't go to any seminar, and these other people have been able to, just as the way things fell out. The bigger a company gets, the more you kind of have to not ad hoc these things.
It's very true.
I think it has very much come to the moment where the need was great enough that the employees put in the extra work. And very clearly, the potential benefit, I mean, you can read the statement that I believe Jeff Alvarez made for Paizo Ownership and Management. They are looking forward to working with the union on making an environment where everyone is happy. I mean, these are not mustache-twirling villains waiting to see whether or not they're going to be able to tie people up and throw them on the train tracks. They are, however, just as busy and overworked and flooded by things like COVID and shipping disasters and printing problems and all of this stuff makes their lives harder too. So there is definitely a potential upside for them in working with the union, so that there is a process in place for them to get all this stuff done.
And we really wanted to focus too, especially, when it first went public and everything, we wanted to make it very clear that it wasn't supposed to be anything antagonistic, that it wasn't supposed to be, you guys are evil and you're ruining the company, or, it's torture to work here or anything like that. It's just, we saw some stuff that we wanted to improve together and acknowledge that, yeah, that these, the people who run the company, they're still just people and they still are flooded with tons of stuff to do. And, giving them unionization stuff is not exactly taking away from their workload. So, but we wanted to let them know, hey, this isn't just for us. This is for the whole company. We are invested in the same thing. We want our products to be good and we want our community to be big and happy community and supportive community. And we wanted to get a seat at the table so that it's, everyone's represented, but it's not about, management versus the workers or anything like that. It's not supposed to be antagonistic. Because like you said, they're not mustache twirling villains. They're not evil. It's, we just want to give more of a voice to kind of everybody that maybe feels kind of siloed off, or, we were talking a little bit earlier about, interdepartmental communication and how it sometimes is lacking, or processes get, crossed from one place to the other. And it's a lot about that and getting everyone on the same page so that we can make sure that, we're all in this together and we're all getting the same benefits out of it. And then if there are problem spots, we can look at those together and say, okay, how do we make this work in a way that, placates everybody, that helps everybody along? So, yeah.
And a formal process for ranking concerns and discussing what you're willing to give and get and compromise on should actually, in the long run, lighten the workload for management. Because right now, managers have to either talk to every single person in the company, which, and not even their department, right? If you're trying to do policies that are equitable throughout, you'd have to talk to everyone, or guess from some minor survey what are people's top priorities. And you might well be thinking, well, people are more concerned about A than B, so I'm going to focus on A and worry about B later. And you only find out 9 months later that no one cared about A, except one person that you happen to hang out with at a party. And B is the number one concern, which no one is mentioning because they're all afraid it's so sensitive that I don't want to start a problem discussing this other issue.
Right,
The even open door policy means that if you are an employee and you're going to talk to Eric, for example, the publisher, I mean, while I worked there, I walked on Eric's office, I walked into Jeff's office, I walked into Lisa's office, when I thought something was important enough. But that did mean I had to sit there and think, is this a thing that I am willing, just by walking into the office, to be saying to my boss's boss or my boss's boss's boss, hey, this is so important and my take on it is so valuable that you need to carve time out of your day to listen to me privately as an individual. And there were times which I thought there was a problem, but I'm like, well, I think this is a problem, but surely everyone thinks this is a problem. If people are coming in and having to work on the weekends, no one thinks that's a good solution to the problem if we've got a 5-day work week. Everyone's going to say that's a problem. So there's no point in me going and saying, Lisa, this was a problem. Well, what do you suggest to solve it? I got nothing. That's not a good use of our time. Yeah. But with a union, they can say, these are our specific problems. This is what the entire union thinks is a smart way to handle it. And these are how we'd like those considerations to be codified in a specific way so we know what is and isn't expected and what will and won't happen.
Right. Yeah. And one of the amazing things that's happened during this whole process is just kind of seeing, people that you might not talk to every day kind of join in and give their opinions and say, hey, here's how I'm seeing this from my angle. It's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Or, I had no idea that was going on in your department. And you really find out how much you didn't know because, you're interacting with people more directly. And so just kind of by virtue of that, we kind of realized, hey, yeah, there are some things that we all kind of feel this way about. And, we should make those the priorities and we should kind of figure out what are the pain points that are holding back the different departments, or, what are the most important things to those people, and see if we can get them addressed. So it's because there really is, there's power in numbers, of course, but it's also, just about the company as a whole and the people in it, and knowing, hey, you're not alone. Just because, like, for example, up until very recently, I was a one-person department. And, how do you bring concerns about stuff like that to the top. And until recently also, my manager was Jeff Alvarez, and he's also president of the company. So he's kind of busy. I can't just always poke him for everything and say, hey, how about this? I have a question about this typo, or, something like that. So getting a venue where people can express their concerns and have it kind of validated and kind of examined with the rest of the folks so that we can figure out the best way to tackle it it's very powerful and very exciting to see happen.
And Paizo has been a company that has been trying to promote a positive community kind of since the beginning, right?
Right.
When other companies have literally nuked their forums, Paizo continues to have moderated forums that are subdivided that talk about, here's our new products, and here's a forum for third-party products. So this isn't even stuff we make, and we're giving you a place to talk about it. And here's Starfinder is a different list of things. And I think that community is one of the reasons why, when it became clear that there was a supermajority of employees that wanted this union, you saw things like the freelancers who were doing a concerted action to withhold work, saying, okay, instead of all the things we told you we were worried about, if you'll just acknowledge the union and negotiate with them in good faith, we will consider that to be covering all the rest of our concerns. And if you went on the forums, you saw there were a lot of employees or a lot of fans who said, if the employees feel they need a union, I believe them and agree with them. These are the people that are making the stuff I love. I want them to have the support and care and environment they need. Right. So I really think that effort to build a community allowed the exact process for this union to exist, because this didn't go exactly the way I've ever seen any unionization effort. And of course, I am not normally involved in unionization efforts, and I was on the outside of this one. I was just expressing my support, but it was a very different feel from how the community and the employees and the freelancers who are, logically speaking, if you are thinking in adversarial terms and you're like, well, the staff isn't doing what we need anymore, clearly we would need skilled freelancers. Well, the freelancers have already said that they are in that corner with the employees. That happened first, as far as I know.
Yeah, it did. That happened pretty quick, I think, after the initial firing.
Yeah.
I think that was like 2 days or something.
And even that, I was not part of that original coalition because they were conversing in places that I didn't happen to be. But they did later contact me and want me to know that they were doing this thing, so that, for example, I could choose, if suddenly Paizo's offering me huge amounts of freelance work, I will know why and would be able to make my own choice on whether or not I wanted to buck that system. It wasn't a formal strike, so it wouldn't be being stabbed, right? But if you don't know what's going on, because they weren't making it public at the time,
right?
You can't make informed decisions about how to proceed with that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Well, hey, we're heading towards the top of the hour. It's a fun conversation. I'd love to keep going, but I don't want to keep you professional people up too late if we've already covered the subject thoroughly. So any additional thoughts, things we want to bring up?
Katina, have you heard anyone outside of Paizo talking about what the unionization of a tabletop RPG company might mean?
I mean, anecdotally, I've had some friends in the industry who reached out and were like, wow, this is really cool. Like, this could start a whole new thing. I'm trying to remember. I feel bad now, but I can't remember. There was a comic book company that just announced they were unionizing today.
That's Image.
Image. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. And, of course, I've seen a lot of the same people being like, yay! So, it's very interesting because obviously it's a first. So there's kind of a lot of people looking at it like, I didn't know that could be a thing. So, I mean, I would be very happy if we inspired more people to do the same thing, if it's that, what's right for their company or their job. But yeah, I mean, just from my friends, from other people in the industry, I've heard, that it's a good step and that it's something they wanted to see, and they're curious to see kind of how that ball rolls and see if anybody else kind of picks up on that momentum. So I guess we'll have to wait and find out.
You guys don't have to answer this question, but I just wonder how many companies are there in RPGs who have enough full-time employees to really unionize?
Oh, I have no idea.
Well, so first of all, you got to decide: are you talking about in the United States, or in the English-speaking world, or in the world at large? Right. So there's definitely Paizo. There's definitely Wizards of the Coast.
Mhm.
There is whatever Asmodee ended up naming their studio, like Edge Studio, when they took RPGs away from Fantasy Flight.
Mhm.
There's Games Workshop, which is not an American company, but is definitely big enough. Uh, I would I would guess there are enough people at Steve Jackson Games, although I don't know the exact number. And then there are companies that people tend to think of as big that have like zero official employees and everyone is just a month-to-month contractor, and that's way more. Or they have one or two employees, right? When you're
Yeah.
looking at hardback books and you're saying, "Hey, here's one from Wizards of the Coast, here's one from Paizo, here's one from," to pick on myself because I know I won't get upset about it, Rogue Genius Games. Sometimes from the outside, you're like, well, there are just as many names in the Rogue Genius Games book as there are in the Paizo book, but we have zero actual employees. We got some
Mhm.
owners, and then everything else is done on a contract per project or per timeline basis. So there's literally zero people at Rogue Genius who would qualify for a union, because the only people who are full time Rogue Genius are employees, or are owners. I mean, Andrew White points out there's a lot of video game studios in the
Mhm.
area that are Paizo size or smaller that could benefit from a union. I believe he's exactly right.
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think games as an industry and comics and sort of geeky stuff in general, because they're also like, there are miniature companies. There's Cool Mini or Not, and there's Reaper, and I don't know the exact size of all these companies, but some of them are definitely going to be big enough. I think there was this feeling that this was a niche industry, especially in the 70s and 80s, maybe even the 90s, and that just no one was big enough, no one was stable enough, no one was taking it seriously enough for something like
Mhm.
a union to make sense. And uh, at Hasbro has gone from being a toy company that happened to make tabletop games to, if you look at where the money's coming from, they are now a tabletop game company that happens to make toys in some other divisions. So games are bigger than they used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and even so, I think Wizards staff specifically for their RPG is smaller than people think it is, because
Yeah.
they assume it's gigantic because Hasbro. But yeah, even then, I think it's smaller. And I know one of the issues, and it wasn't an issue, but one of the things we kind of had to take into consideration when we were getting the effort together was the number of eligible employees, because we have a lot of managers and like
Mm-hmm.
directors and kind of weird titles. And so there ended up, I believe we're somewhere around 80 something employees now, but there were only like 50 that were eligible. So it's also a matter of, what people's titles are, and what, what kind of different power dynamics there are, and what qualifies to be part of a union. So
Yeah, basically under U.S. law, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, if any employee reports to you, then regardless of what your title is, you're basically management, and you are not eligible to be part of that union.
Yeah.
right, yeah,
But the unions are for the people that don't have other employees answering to them.
right.
And Sean Vera points out that Games Workshop has a huge staff, might be the largest in the TTRPG space, and they are headquartered at Nottingham,
Nice,
which
yeah.
is in the UK. And
Mhm.
they might already be unionized for all I know. So
Yeah, they could be. They
Yeah.
might be. We don't know it. But the other thing is that Games Workshop is, to my mind, largely a miniatures company.
Mhm.
They have an RPG line, but I bet if you looked at the number of people that were spending 40 hours a week on RPGs, you would find that was a tiny sliver of the number of people they've got working on 40K and miniatures lines and paint lines and all the other stuff they have.
Yeah.
it's I'd like to see the breakdown of profits sometimes on physical components as opposed to books, because just given the amount that they sell, I have to think they're making a lot of money in those little figurines.
Well, there was an anecdotal thing. Yeah, Andrew White says he believes Paizo's the largest TTRPG company in the industry. I believe in terms of employees working full time in RPG material, I believe he's right.
Yeah.
It's certainly larger than Wizards of the Coast. It's certainly larger than yeah. It does make a lot of stuff. It's I think there are more dedicated tabletop RPG employees at Paizo than any other company that I'm aware of, and maybe that exists. There's an anecdotal story about profits at Games Workshop, which super short boils down to they had an analyst come in and look at their product line and determine what was making the most money. Pardon me. And that analyst determined that the largest profit margin was on their paint. And so, according to him, you should stop making games and miniatures and just sell paint, because the paint has the largest profit margin. This is, of course, idiotic, because without the games and the miniatures, no one cares if this is ultramarine blue without there being ultramarines who want that color, without the color codices that here is snake bite yellow. Well, if we don't know that this orc's teeth are supposed to be snake bite yellow, we don't care about snake bite yellow. So, and that, I think, is very much from the era where the thought was that a lot of normal business processes just could not apply to creative art and comic and story and game companies. And I think the answer is that they can apply. You just have to have enough people that are both professionals in the area in question and understand what tabletop games and comics and similar media are.
Yeah. It's like you mentioned earlier, it's becoming big enough that now we're like, hey, we demand to be taken seriously. Because a lot of people, I mean, there was the sentiment of like, you should feel lucky to work in such an industry where you just get to play with games all day kind of thing. So it's a little bit of a kind of signal of that shift. I think that, this is a big industry and it is becoming increasingly popular. So I think it's only natural that folks who work in the industry would want to, have comfortable working conditions and feel represented.
And importantly, since this is not just, a writers or editors guild, the people who do warehouse and customer service work at Paizo do not necessarily have more of a happy time at work because the things that they are shipping and boxing and packaging and answering questions about happen to be games. That is customer service and warehouse work, just like if it was boxes of cheese snacks or anything else.
Yeah. But, don't eat the miniatures.
Has a harder time because people are much more invested in their game worlds and their fiction than they are in their cheese snacks and Slinkies. So my guess is that the customer service job is, in fact, harder and less fun than for a lot of other less interesting companies.
I'm thinking about edible miniatures now.
Right? Yeah.
Did you see there's a Kickstarter for gummy minis right now?
I saw that,
yeah. No, that's genius. So.
Yeah, little gummy orcs and goblins so that when you kill them, you eat them. Of course, as the publisher of Gingerbread Kaiju, I feel that we have the edible game market covered, but more power to them.
Are you going to sell kits where people can decorate their own kaijus?
We have tried to do that multiple times, but the manufacturing cost of the cutouts has so far prevented us from ever wanting to give it a go.
I can imagine.
I wonder if you'd use paper templates. That just got me thinking.
We got paper templates in the core book.
Yeah.
Nice.
But for a Kickstarter, we wanted the cookie cutters. So you do the gingerbread, and then here is the King Konk outline. And we have been close to cutting a deal with a manufacturer twice, and it always falls apart on unit cost right at the end.
Oh man!
I don't know. You have people over. It's like a party. You want to serve them food. So what if see that blue dragon in the corner in the back of the dungeon? Okay, well he's a chocolate cake.
Yeah.
And if you kill him, you get to eat him when we're done. I don't know. These are thoughts I have. That's
I'd be down.
Yeah, I would be up for
that. I
that.
have half written a sequel to Gingerbread Kaiju called The Mines of S'moria, where you make kinds of s'mores as you play.
Good.
Nice. I feel like we're drifting off topic.
Yes, we are drifting off topic.
No, not
but
at all.
Maybe that just means we've covered the topic.
It might. Katina, as the official representative of the union, anything else that you would like to say or things you'd like to bring up?
No, I'm just kind of looking forward to seeing where this all goes and seeing, I'm curious who's going to be our bargaining committee because, like I said, we haven't decided that yet. So we'll see who that is going on to be our fearless leaders. And, it's like Owen mentioned, it's a long process. So this is certainly faster than we thought the first step would go, which is wonderful. And, it's way to go, Paizo Management, for that. but it's obviously still a process. So I'm curious to see kind of how things will go with the bargaining and with the contracts. And, all I can do is wait and see and enjoy the community support that we have from our lovely community.
And once the bargaining team has been selected, that might be another opportunity to perhaps get one of them on and talk to them about what training they've undertaken and what they expect the process to be like and what next steps will look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how public facing it'll be. These are our, committee, but
I don't know either.
It is. It's a lot of pressure, probably. But I mean, certainly there will be future developments that I'm sure we'll want to talk about. So.
Okay, so TBD.
Yeah, exactly. Long way of saying TBD.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Owen, always a pleasure, sir. Appreciate you coming out. To any listeners or viewers, you can follow what happens to the union at Paizo Workers on, and also their websites is United Paizo. Sorry, I'm not talking right. UnitedPaizoWorkers.org.
Yep.
And they sell all kinds of cool merch. If you want to get a T-shirt like Katina is wearing, or mugs and masks, and oh my God, just like about everything else, you can get at Redbubble store. I should try to say
magnet.
I had every intention of being drinking out of my United Paizo Workers mug, but it's in the dishwasher. So
dang it. Next time.
Phone cases, water bottles. So baby onesies. So
yeah, and those proceeds from that will go towards stuff for the union. So we're not just sitting back and counting cash or anything like that.
A union takes money and it takes time and it will have costs, and a great way to support the union and get some cool looking stuff that I love how cool the logo is, because next time I'm at an in-person con, I have every expectation of seeing people wear that T-shirt advertising the union just because it looks cool. So if you want to support the union in a really concrete way, beyond following them on Twitter and looking at the website occasionally, I recommend you go and buy some merch.
Yeah.
Sweet. And Chandra says, congratulations again on the union. So glad the first steps went so well.
Yeah, thank you. We're thrilled.
So, and on that happy note, we'll wrap it up. Call it a podcast. Owen and Katina, thanks again. And I'm losing my ability to speak English coherently. Please forgive me. It's late. And we will catch you all next time on the BAMF podcast.
Bye, folks.
Thanks.